Welcome back to a new installment of the Wide Right Podcast. Manny Navarro here from The Athletic, joined once again by Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast. It is Thursday, November 14th, right around 4 p.m. Carlos, we are now almost a week removed from Miami's first loss of the season at Georgia Tech, 28-23. Hurricanes still control their own destiny. They win out, win their
Yeah,
final two
thanks to
games.
Pitt laying an egg. Thank you, Pitt.
They win out. They can still get to Charlotte for the ACC championship game, but I think we know now, based on the college football playoff rankings, that whoever finishes with the second best record in the ACC, they're probably not getting into the 12-team playoff, like I've been telling you since August.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty obvious. We even discussed it last week before the Georgia Tech game. We said they need to win out. That's the bottom line. They controlled the destiny in their own hands. It's all in front of them, right? They had the opportunity of a lifetime. They still do. So all they've got to do is win these next two games, right? Get in the ACC title game and let it rip one more time in that championship and see what happens. The problem is, um, I think what's been happening over the last several weeks and building up throughout conference play is there's enough tape now, and there's enough sort of a magnifying glass on the flaws of this defense and this team in general, where a very well coached team and a team that's well prepared, even if they aren't as talented as the Hurricanes, can come in there and beat them because they come up with a plan to do so and to really exploit them in areas where they've had no answer for it. So the main concern for me now is, at a time where the best teams in the country sort of seem to be peaking and sort of it's building to a crescendo and getting more signature wins and really building up. Or if they're losing to big opponents, big time opponents, and bouncing back. This team has sort of regressed during conference play and has been uneven in the way they've played. And defensively, they've just been terrible during conference play the entire time.
Yeah, and Cam Ward obviously didn't have a great game. I know his numbers 300 was it 300 almost 50 passing yards and three touchdowns, no picks. Did have the turnover. I know it wasn't necessarily a terrible statistical game for him, but it's obvious that teams have adjusted to what was making him successful, right? And making him face different coverages, holding his receivers up at the line of scrimmage. We saw several instances where Georgia Tech was yanking on Miami receivers and not, Miami not getting the calls that they wanted in those situations. Regardless, teams learn you, right? You go through 10 games, teams figure you out, teams figure out what you do well, and good coaches expose you. And Georgia Tech, we've been talking about this for a long time. Yes, they're not going to have the same level of athletes or depth as Miami in certain positions because, it is a smart guy school, right? You have to be good academically to get into Georgia Tech. You can't just take everybody, and that's always been their way for a long time. But they do recruit well enough and have talent enough to compete and certainly beat Miami. And now they're 15 and 14 all time against the Hurricanes. One of the Power Four programs that Miami has a losing record against. So devastating loss from Miami from a we have no wiggle room anymore to lose perspective, but it's not a end all be all loss. So Miami wins out. They win their last three games against ACC competition. They'll be a top four seed. They'll play in the quarterfinal at the Peach Bowl, and they'll have a chance to advance deep into the playoffs, which I would say is still mission accomplished. Um, from a big picture perspective with the program. We'll talk a little bit more about the Georgia Tech game. But one thing I wanted to do, and we're also going to get to your mailbag questions. One thing I wanted to do, Carlos, was sort of take a deeper dive on this roster from a big picture perspective. I did that for the Florida Gators this past weekend because the Gators, of course, announced that Billy Napier is going to be back. At least that's what their administration is saying, right? They're saying they gave him the
Good for
vote of
them. Thank
confidence.
you.
We're
Thank you,
not
Florida.
firing you yet, Billy. We're keeping you around for another year, or at least telling everybody that's what we're doing. Um, so I broke down the Gators roster, Carlos, and I looked at all the recruits. Not that there's a lot of them. Looked at the position by position, who they're losing, and I said, well, we should probably do that for Miami, right? It's the bye week. What else? What else is there to talk about? Let's look big picture. How sustainable is this success? How is this team going to look without Cam Ward? So I wanted to do that. I wanted to dive into a position by position look, but let's start with this, Carlos. People have raised this question uh, about Miami all season, the haters, so to speak, that much of Miami's success is a product of Cam Ward, that Miami would not be 9-1 without Cam Ward. Did the loss to Georgia Tech confirm that to you? or tell you, um, it's just a bad loss. You just shrug it off as a bad performance by the defense.
Listen, we've been talking about this off air since pre-conference play, right? Since non-conference play, and I've been saying it. I think this team is nowhere near as good as they are right now without Cam Ward. And I said, after that, I think it was the Louisville game that I think they may have three losses at that point in the season.
Hmm.
I think this right now is like a three-loss team without Cam Ward. I don't think they end up coming back against Cal. I don't think they win a shootout against Louisville. And they probably lose again to Georgia Tech. Maybe they lose to Virginia Tech as well. So they could be a four-loss team. Who knows? But, of course, they would adjust their style of play on offense. They'd probably be a lot more run heavy, be a lot more sort of efficient in terms of the passing game, not trying to hit the home run all the time. They could still be a really good offense, but I think the explosiveness and the sort of uh, special way this offense has played through most of the games has been directly related to Cam Ward and what he's been able to do in the pocket and the throws he's able to make and the ways he's able to play. That's not really something you could duplicate. Not even just on this team, but in other teams across the country. So to me, having a guy who clearly right now is playing as the best quarterback in the country makes a huge difference and is worth at least, three wins,
Hmm.
if not more. So I don't think this exposed it for me anymore. I just think what happened is this loss is sort of a culmination of everything we discussed this entire season that we've been bringing up during the podcast. And it all sort of came to pass in one game. And it just sort of all sort of exploded onto the scene because there's been times where you've seen some of it happen and then they get away with it because they can go around other issues. So this game they weren't able to run the ball. They didn't protect Cam Ward as well. Cam Ward did his thing where he runs around and tries to find somebody open. Didn't work this time. Mario was gonna Mario. Didn't kick the field goal on certain occasions where he could have had at least 6 points that he left on the board, which would have given them a 1 point win in that instance. Guidry didn't adjust the defense, didn't start doing some of the things that we discussed last week that he could do to help. He did it a couple times and it worked really well, and then he went away from it. We saw Shannon Dawson sort of look perplexed in terms of how do we get this offense going and use some different things to try and get the ball rolling offensively and get points on the board and just wasn't there. We talked about early in the season, people were saying Shannon Dawson's in his bag. I'm like, dude, the bag is not there. It's just Cam Ward running around doing his thing. And we saw that this past weekend. So for me, it's a situation where all this came to a head. Now they have to address it. They have to sit down and have a come to Jesus moment and look at each other in the face and say, listen, all this has been lingering for a long time. We've got to get this fixed and get it corrected now, or else that destiny that we saw ahead of us, that opportunity we had, that window is going to get slammed shut, and we're not going to get to where we should be.
Yeah. I agree. I look, ultimately he's going to need to find another special quarterback. And I think not that every major college football contender has a great quarterback starting for them. If you look at the QB ratings, Mississippi, yes, they've got the number one quarterback. Indiana, they've got the number two. Ohio State has the number three. Oregon has the number six. Penn State has the number eight. This is all in terms of QB rating. Colorado, who's now a Big 12 serious contender, 11th. SMU 13th. Texas 14. Alabama 15. I mean, these are all teams that have a shot to make the playoff. But there are examples of teams that have average quarterbacks, right? That somehow get the job done. BYU, their quarterback is 45th. Texas A&M's quarterback, Marcel Reed, special runner, but 44th in QBR. Vanderbilt with Diego Pavia, he's been a great story and helped them pull off some upsets, but he's the 40th ranked quarterback. I think what this tells us is Miami definitely has to go quarterback shopping, right? And find somebody to replace Cam Ward. But they also got work to do in other areas to make
Yep.
this team better. And I think um, you look at the defensive line, for instance, Carlos, and the lack of pressure and teams making adjustments and the way Georgia Tech exposed Miami in the run game. We expected a lot, right, of improvement on the defensive line in the front seven based on Mario's recruiting of the linebacker position. They signed a bunch of guys. They signed guys on the defensive line. And yet I sit there and I go through Pro Football Focus and I start counting snaps and starts and doing the math. I'm like, a lot of the new guys that were brought in haven't played a ton. You've had Maui Noah, you've had Wesley Basaint, you've had a sprinkle in of Jalen Alderman, But because of injuries and because of other things that have happened, Popo Aguirre hasn't been on the field a ton. I know he's hurt again, which has kept him out. Bobby Washington's played 14 snaps. Malik Bryant's played 130. Chase Smith, who's been here forever and not played, 75 snaps. Cameron Pruitt, 44. He's the guy they're all excited about. Hasn't played. Adarius Hayes, 8 snaps at the linebacker position. You go to the defensive line. Yes, Tyler Barron, Simeon Barrow, and Akeem Mesidor have started all 10 games. You got Ruben Bain back for 6 starts. Elijah Alston, the other transfer, 4 starts. But then you look at everybody else in this defensive line. CJ Clark, the transfer, 229 snaps. Ahmad Moten, who's been here now in his third year, 194. And then everybody after that, Carlos, under 100 snaps. Justin Scott, 82 snaps. Cole Mahanafe, 55 snaps. Armando Blunt, 44 snaps. Anthony Campbell, 43, Booker Pickett, 26, Josh Horton, 25. Um, Not a lot of development of the young players. That's kind of been a storyline that I think has been, I don't know, not maybe talked about enough by people.
Yeah, and I think, listen, if you're talking about, let's go back to that point about elite quarterback play. You can win without elite quarterback play, but you have to be like Georgia and Alabama in the way they built those teams, right?
Right.
You can have a Stetson Bennett at quarterback, which is not necessarily a world beater, but who's efficient, who runs your offense, correctly, efficiently, effectively, doesn't make mistakes, knows where to go with the football, isn't going to put you in a bad position, and wins games for you that way just by holding the fort. But they have to rely on the supreme talent on the other side, right? They have to an amazing defense, an elite defense, and really elite offensive and defensive line play along with skill position guys that can really make teams pay for it by just on offense catching a 5 yard hitch and turning it into a touchdown or running the football and being able to break big plays and doing those sorts of things. And defensively on the back end, not giving up big plays, making big plays themselves, turning over teams and doing those sorts of things. That's sort of the model. If you aren't going to have an elite quarterback, you got to be elite everywhere else to be able to supplement that, right? The
Hmm.
elite quarterback helps you get to a point like we saw, with Miami this year. They will get you to a point. They'll make you competitive. They'll get you to a point where you can compete for a conference championship, like Colorado with Shedeur Sanders, right? But if you don't have the other pieces in play, then you're always going to be at the mercy of that quarterback having an off game, somebody along the offensive line not playing well, the skill position guys not being able to be effective because the matchup they have just isn't in their favor. And then what are you going to do? If you're not
Yeah.
built to sustain that, then you're going to suffer losses like we saw Miami do. And we thought, coming into the season, they were built well enough on both sides of the ball to be able to compete and not be elite, but be really good. And you see the difference between being really good and being elite. If they were elite, they don't lose to Georgia Tech. They don't give up 271 yards rushing. If you have an
Right.
elite front seven, right, or elite front six as they play now, if you have an elite offensive line, you don't rush for under 100 yards against Georgia Tech. You hammer the ball, you keep drives alive. And when you've got to get a 4th and 1, 4th and 3, you don't have to put it all on your quarterback. You can hand the ball off to a stud running back and a Haas offensive line and pick up those yards with no problem and physically will yourself to victory, which they're not able to do right now. So there's a lot of holes in a lot of areas. And specifically, the one area I think on the defensive line that doesn't get talked about enough is because Barrows played so well, that defensive tackle spot is still weak. It's still not where it needs to be. We talked about that last season and coming
Hmm.
into this season. Barrow was a revelation. He's played really well, but he only played, what, 13 snaps this past game? And as a result, look at what happened. When he's out of the game,
Yeah, he
that
got banged up early. He got
it
banged up early.
completely changes that defensive line and changes that
Yeah.
that run front. So the other thing is you also have guys on the back end, it's two safeties that aren't great in run support.
Hmm.
Say what you will about James Williams, he wasn't always in the right spot. He was a little crazy at times, but he would come up and hit people, and he'd be active in the run game, and usually be in the right spot when he's coming to fill a gap or get his run fits. Cam Kitchens was always in the right spot generally, and would be physical and active in the run game, and that would help. But when you've got guys like Mish Powell and Jaden Harris coming up and being on the wrong run fit in the wrong gap and missing tackles and allowing running backs to break loose and have nobody in the back end to make that last tackle and have to run guys down, that really kills your run defense.
I wasn't in Atlanta for the game. I really don't travel that often anymore at all with this team because I have different responsibilities. I watch different games, write about different games. It's not just Miami. So I spend a lot of my weekends now on the couch unless Miami's playing at home. And I watch a bunch of games. So I wasn't in Atlanta, but I wanted to ask the coaching staff about the shoes. I sometimes, it's something as simple as shoes that can screw a team up. I know that turf in Atlanta isn't great, but I saw far too many situations where guys were losing their footing. You saw it with Cam Ward when he tried to throw the football a few times where he would try to escape and all of a sudden he's slipping and having to hold himself up. But you saw it a lot on defense. Kiko Mauinoa many times was, trying to get to a certain point on the field to close a hole and was losing his footing. I'm not trying to make excuses for Miami, Carlos, but somebody needs to be blamed for that, right? Am I wrong? Didn't seem like maybe they were wearing the right
I mean,
footwear for that game.
that's on the equipment team, right? That's on the
Yeah,
equipment staff. You've got to come out pregame and you've got to, you're assuming the field is going to be in a certain condition, but then you have to go out there and physically check the field and see what sort of cleats are going to work. Because if you've got longer grass or you got longer turf or you got a faster turf or a slower turf, you use different shoes, different cleats, size
yeah,
cleats to do that. And sometimes, players love to do what's called splatting up their shoes, right? Which
yep,
is taping their ankles, but taping underneath what is the arch of the foot to make it look cool and cover up the foot. But a lot of times, if you have that on the wrong turf or the wrong grass, that's going to make it a lot slipperier for you. So you
right.
don't want to use it. So the equipment staff should come out and say, "Hey, listen, we're not splatting you up today. We're going to just go with a straight ankle tape." Okay. And,
Hmm.
that's on them. But ultimately, there was a lot of blame to go around for this game, not just on the players and the coaches, but just the entire program in general, because this is 2 years in a row where you come into a game against Georgia Tech where you should handle this, you should handle business, and you don't. Last year, a lot of people tried to make, the fan base coming into this game. We're like, oh, we're gonna get the get back this game, right? We're gonna beat the
Hmm.
shit out of them because we got a game robbed from us last year because that wasn't a fumble, and they called it a fumble on Don Chaney. We like to sort of gloss over the fact it's become this new narrative, as people like to use nowadays when they hear something they don't like. It's a narrative now. It was a narrative that Mario Cristobal made a mistake and didn't take a knee. It was a narrative. The referee stole that game because they shouldn't have called a fumble. Guys, we just saw again, Mario just got outcoached, right? Didn't
Hmm.
handle game time situations the best. So those things that we should have looked at last year and seen as a red flag, back again this year. We need to improve. We need to be better. And not taking a knee cost a victory last year. Not being prepared for this game and making adjustments in game cost them again this year. Because the minute they started getting hit in the mouth in that first half on offense and defense, they needed to adjust, right? They needed to go into halftime, adjust the game plan, and make sure they came out ready for the second half, and it just didn't happen. Um, Specifically defensively, they were doing some crazy shit to me that like you're getting beat in the run game. You've got a quarterback that can't throw the ball basically. And you're running a lot of stunts and getting your defensive linemen out of gaps and moving them, taking them
Not
off the line
not
of
setting
scrimmage.
not setting the edge.
Right, and they're running stunts and moving guys around and pulling guys around like they're offensive linemen trying to get into another gap, and it's just that doesn't make sense to me because if you have a guy that you know can't run the football, you need to get into your gaps immediately and take control of the line of scrimmage. If you want to move your D linemen, slant them. Do that. Stem at the beginning of the play before the ball is snapped. Move them and confuse them that way. Don't be pulling them off the line of scrimmage because you need to occupy the line of scrimmage if you got a team that can't throw the football. The other thing is, we talked about it last week. They kept going man to man against the team that can't throw the football, and they have a quarterback that's running the ball. You are now playing 11 on 11. When you play man to man in that situation, and those receivers run the corners off and the secondary off, or your backers off, what's going to happen? Those guys have their back turned to the football and they're not able to come up and make plays. And that gives Georgia Tech an advantage up front, which is another thing they didn't adjust to.
Yeah, 3rd and 18 play sticks out like a sore thumb at the very first play of the fourth quarter when you had an opportunity to grab control of the game and
Yep.
left the middle of the field open. I know a lot of fans and different people have put out videos sort of exposing the what happened on the 3rd and 18 play. But again, it comes back to trust, the guys trusting each other. It looked like Mish Powell basically looked off the receiver, let him go to cover the underneath route. But the safeties were way too far down the field. They're like 25 yards down the field when it's 3rd and 18. You need to be right at the marker, not 25 yards down the field. Um, and just too many situations where you look at it and you say, who the hell is coaching this defense and who the hell is taking leadership on the field? I know it's easy to point the finger at the coach, but at some point you need the guys on the field to man up and get the job done and to not let stupid things like that happen. And it's infuriating if you're a Miami fan.
Yeah.
Look, this defense has given up 28 points or more now in 5 of their last 6 games. No matter who is playing quarterback, that's far too much. You're not getting sacks or pressure on the quarterback anymore the few times that they do throw the football. So you gotta make changes this week. This bye week has to be huge for them. I know they're not 100%. I know they've got guys banged up. We mentioned Simeon Barrow getting dinged up in this game. He's a 10 game starter for this team, but other guys, Tyler Barron has to play better. He
Yeah.
went from being a
He's disappeared.
superstar, the first few games of the season to basically taking himself out of plays because he's trying to make big plays in the backfield, and not setting
And
the
I think
edge.
that's a theme now for the defense. I think a lot of these guys are missing tackles. They're out of position because they feel like they need to play hero ball, and they're rather than playing within the system and within the structure of what it is they're supposed to be doing, they're trying to make the heroic play, and that's putting them out of position and making, putting the team in a bad spot because they're not where they're supposed to be. And once that back or that receiver gets to an area where that person should be and they're not there, then it's a big play.
All right, Wake Forest is the next opponent. They're not a very good team, but they are 3-0 on on the road this season. Wake Forest is. So they're a good road team that plays their best football on the road. Miami plays their home finale against the Demon Deacons. It's been a long time since they've played Wake Forest. They don't play them very often, but now that we've got this new ACC and a different rotation, they'll see them a little bit more often than they have. Um, I'm expecting Miami will probably be a two touchdown favorite in that game because I think Wake Forest is 4-5, if I'm not mistaken. They
They
played
are
North
4-5.
Yeah, they played North Carolina this weekend. North Carolina's been really good. North Carolina's got 17 sacks in their last two games. Mac Brown's team is playing defense. Who knew that they could do that in Chapel Hill? But we'll see how Wake Forest looks against North Carolina in that game. Either way, they'll still have a chance to make a bowl game, even if they lose that North Carolina game by beating Miami. So there is motivation for their players if they want to go bowling, to come down here and beat the Hurricanes. Not like they're a lost season and there's nothing to play for them. They're 4-5, which means they'll still have a chance to get the 6 wins. So we'll see what happens with that game. But we're gonna get to the mailbag shortly. I want to do it just a position by position look. Week 10, playing time, confidence level at the position going forward, how we feel about it, what we think Miami has to do in the offseason in terms of transfer portal help, etc. So let's start, Carlos. We'll go the basic route here. Quarterback. Um, Emory Williams has appeared in one game this season, the Ball State game, played 32 snaps. Reese Poffenbarger has played 33 snaps you know, mop up duty for Cam Ward mostly. What are your thoughts on the quarterback position? Do you have somebody that you look at in college football and say, I'd like to see that guy in green and orange next season?
Listen, DJ Lagway is my guy, right? I've said it multiple times. Billy Napier staying maybe sort of hurts that a little bit, but I don't know. I don't know. I think DJ Lagway probably sees what's going on there in Florida. He sees the writing on the wall. He sees the recruiting class that's sort of non-existent at this point and saying, "Yeah, maybe this isn't the spot where I can jump in next year and be successful." Because at the end of the day, he wants to take snaps with a team where he can make his mark for the NFL, and he's going to need talent around him to do that. So to me, that's the guy you go after. I mean, you couldn't have asked for anything more from Cam Ward so far this season for the Hurricanes. I don't think you're going to find another Cam Ward necessarily in the portal. I don't know if that guy's out there, but we weren't. I wasn't expecting Cam Ward to be Heisman level Cam Ward this season either. So who knows? Maybe there is a guy who fits the system well and could come in and do the same kind of things. Ultimately, really, I don't trust who's left on the roster when Cam Ward leaves, right? Reese Poffenbarger, I talked about him once he transferred over when I saw his tape. That's not the guy you want running your team. And I don't think the Hurricanes see him long term as being that kind of guy. I think he's just a body to fill out the roster and an emergency sort of quarterback. Emory Williams is okay. He can be a Stetson Bennett kind of guy. To me, I think that's his ceiling, but he needs to have the talent around him to be able to do that. So we're going to need to see improvement at the skill position and that offensive line to be able to get him there consistently and be able to be that guy for the offense. And they're going to be able to they're going to have to be able to rely on the running game to be able to support him in that way also, because now it can't be Cam Ward throwing the ball 40 times a game. You need to be able to hang your hat on that running game and try and at least be sort of a 50-50 split or maybe 60-40 run and let Emory play off the play action.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know who the guy is. There are some interesting names as you can go shopping for a quarterback in the offseason. One of them is Darian Mensah. I don't know if you've seen this kid from Tulane. He's a freshman. He's completed 65, almost 66% of his passes, 16 touchdowns, four picks, averaging about 205 yards passing a game. But he is among the talented young players who's getting quality time playing against good competition. Let's not forget, Tulane is one of the best group of five schools, they've played teams like Oklahoma and other people like that this season. So he's faced some good competition. That's one guy. Thomas Castellanos from Boston College, who was number two in quarterback rating, entered the transfer portal this week. Carlos, or
Yeah.
he supposedly is entering the transfer portal. He got benched. By Bill O'Brien up there. He's a guy that probably runs the ball a lot more. Than you want your quarterback to do. But look, he was 10th in the country in QBR when he got benched. So to me, he's another guy that's interesting. He's got a year left of eligibility. Who knows where he ends up, but he'll be an interesting name to watch. John Mateer, who another Washington State quarterback. Have you seen any of Washington State this year?
No, no, I have not.
Tremendous.
I'm waiting for the Apple Cup.
That happened, I think, in week 3 already. Washington State beat Washington, by the way. John Mateer, sophomore, 62% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, 6 picks. He's averaging 260 yards passing a game. Another sophomore type guy who's played a lot. And then Josh Hoover from TCU, 3,200 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, 8 picks. He's averaging 323 passing yards a game. To me, those are all guys that I look at and I say, man, they're not in situations that they probably want to be in. If they can upgrade and find themselves on a better team that can actually win a national championship and play a starring role, those are guys that I'm looking at here early on. Before we get to the transfer portal process. All right,
Yeah, listen, but you know what's going to have to happen before they get one of those guys is Miami. It is critical they win the next two games and win the ACC championship because if those guys look over and they say that if Cam Ward couldn't win a title, an
That's
ACC
true.
title with this team, what the hell am I going to do? What are they going to do with me, right?
Yeah, correct. All right. Running back, pretty confident that Damian Martinez is going to go pro after this season. I know he hasn't had monster numbers. He's sharing the role with Mark Fletcher, but I think you and I agree that Miami will probably not have him next year. Assuming that's the case, you have Mark Fletcher, you have Jordan Lyle. I think both of those guys are going to stick around. My question is AJ Allen. He's only played 51 snaps so far. I like him as a nice change of pace back. But unfortunately, I look at his situation and his playing time and say, well, if I had to put $100 down on whether or not he's here next year, I'd probably say no. So
Right.
you're going to have Fletcher, Lyle, and then Chris Johnson, he's going to be entering his third year, who's more of like a receiving type back, kick return man. He'll probably be back. You got Chris Wheatley Humphrey, and then you got a few guys coming in as freshmen. But do you think Miami needs to go out and get another transfer portal running back?
Listen, I think from what we've seen from Mark Fletcher last year and this year now coming back from the injury, I think he can be a featured back. He can be a number one guy. I think with Jordan Lyle's got the talent to be a featured back as well. So I think those two guys are the 1-2 punch. And then you mix in sort of that lightning of Chris Johnson. I think you've got a solid backfield. I mean, if AJ Allen decides to say, who knows, maybe he does. Then you've got a really solid room. I think they'll be fine at running back. I don't
Hmm.
think they need to go out and necessarily spend money on a running back in the portal. I think
Right.
they could allocate that money somewhere else.
Maybe safety.
Yeah, safety, corner, linebacker.
Receiver, I think, is probably one. All right, so you've got Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George, who are seniors. Sam Brown Jr. is a redshirt. Sam Brown Jr. is a redshirt junior. But odds are probably good he will not be here. I'm assuming he'll probably try to go pro. The most interesting one is Isaiah Horton, who has an NFL body. He's made 3 starts. If he comes back, I think he's hands down your number one
Yeah.
receiver. But beyond that, Carlos, it's really interesting because Miami does not have a tremendous amount of proven talent. You've got Ray Joseph, who's handled kicks and not played a whole lot in the 2 years he's been here. Shamar Kirk, who I think is probably gone. He's played 22 snaps here in the 2 years he's been here. You got JoJo Trader, the freshman, who's I think a talent, but again needs to develop. Nye Carr, who's played 32 snaps, and then you have Chance Robinson. Wide receiver is a position that is, I think, going to change quite a bit based on what's available in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and they need to go out and get somebody because I think Isaiah Horton is that one guy, like you said, you can rely on. He's a proven commodity. He has big play potential. I think if he becomes a focal point of the offense, can be a big time receiver. The other guys right now, we don't know what's going to happen. I think they need one more guy at least to go out there and be another number one and 1A and 1B with Isaiah Horton, and then see if those other guys develop. Play more, play JoJo Trader more, play Ray Ray more, and see what else you got there. Maybe
Yeah,
one or two guys.
and there will be guys who go in the portal. Receiver is one of those positions that you see a lot of movement in the offseason, with guys becoming available. All right, tight end. Elijah Royo is a redshirt junior. This is his 4th year. He's starting a lot. I don't know where he gets drafted, if he leaves early, but I tend to lean towards him going into the draft. He's been here 4 years already, dealt with injuries. I think if he does well in workouts, he's probably gone. So that means that leaves you. Cam McCormick is done. So that leaves you with Riley Williams.
You can't get a 10th year.
No, you can't get Cam McCormick for 10th year. That leaves you with Riley Williams, Jackson Carver, and Elijah Lofton. I like Elijah Lofton. He's played
Yeah.
120 snaps this year, no starts. Riley Williams played 163. But I look at that position. I know they're going to sign a couple freshmen. I still say to myself, I'd like another veteran guy in there if possible.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have had Mason Taylor come down here with his brother, but alas, earwax, as Dumbledore would say. But I think even if they don't get a guy in the portal, to me, I think they're fine at tight end. I like Elijah Lofton a lot. I like Riley Williams a lot. If they want to add one more veteran guy that maybe isn't necessarily a frontline tight end guy, maybe another guy could be sort of a Cam McCormick, a sort of a bowling ball to add depth to the roster. I think that'd be fine.
All right. Offensive line, Zach Carpenter's gone, so you're going to need a new starting center. The interesting ones here are Jalen Rivers, Matthew McCoy, Inez Cooper, and Francis Mauigoa. Francis Mauigoa is definitely back because he can't leave after 2 years. But uh, Rivers, McCoy, and Cooper can all go if they want to go. I think the only one who, if had he been healthy, the whole season is for sure a slam dunk to leave is Jalen Rivers. Everybody else, I think there's a chance that they're back. Plus, you've got Markel Bell, who's made 5 starts and played 443 snaps. You got Ryan Rodriguez, who has 1 year of eligibility left after this year. So you've got essentially 7 guys. You're going to be down to 6 on that offensive line. Among the freshmen and player development crew, Samson Okunlola, 63 snaps. Hasn't played a whole lot in his first 2 years here. Less than 100 snaps in 2 seasons for a 5 star.
Yeah, if I had to
Uh,
bet $100, I'd bet he's gone.
yeah, Antonio Tripp, he's been here 2 years. He's played 10 snaps. Tommy Kinsler, Bruno Kinsler, played 55 snaps in 2 years. Luis Cristobal is gone. And then Frankie Tinalau, the Australian, 52 snaps in 2 seasons. Then you have Derek Plaz, Nino Francavilla, and Juan Minaya, the freshman who just got here. So the state of the offensive line, I would say you probably need 1 or 2 transfers to help bridge the gap between injury and they've signed 1 or 2 offensive linemen every offseason through the portal anyway, the last couple of years. This year it was
Yeah.
just Zach Carpenter, but the year before that they got 2 guys. So I would assume, right, when I look at it, am I wrong to assume that? Especially if Jalen Rivers goes. I
Yeah, I
think
think you've got to get a center and a guard.
yeah, I think you
Yeah.
can trust Markel Bell at left tackle or move Francis Mauigoa over there and switch Bell to the right side. Just
Listen,
depends on
Markel
who you
Bell's
like
been
more.
been actually improving a lot, and this he was the highest rated offensive lineman in this last game against Georgia Tech.
Hmm.
So I think he's probably cemented himself at left tackle, and he's got that left tackle size. As
Right.
good as Noah is, I don't know that he's got that left tackle size. I think right tackle is probably the right spot for him.
Yeah, and McCoy has been okay. Cooper has not had a spectacular year, but assuming he comes back, I mean, 4 out of 5 starters is a good place to start, assuming you lose Rivers, who still
Yeah.
could come back if he wanted to. So,
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Jalen Rivers, because of the injury early in this year, because he's been flopped from tackle to guard and has been swapped inside out, I would come back another year if I were him, just to establish myself as an NFL guard. Because I think coming into the season, they would have finally realized, hopefully, that their best offensive lineman is with Bell at tackle and Rivers at guard there on the left side. And that would allow him to have a full season of tape now again in his last year at guard, showing the NFL what he can do. As opposed to being maybe a fringe left tackle guy or a practice squad type tackle, now he could be a third round guard maybe.
yeah. Defensive line is really interesting because they spent a lot of money on it to bring in transfers, and now a lot of those guys are going to be gone. Tyler Barron will be gone. Simeon Barrow will be gone. Akeem Mesidor, I think this is his 5th year in college. He's just like Jalen Rivers.
Yeah, he's
Uh,
gone.
he's gone. Elijah Alston gone. CJ Clark gone. Basically, what you have coming back next year is Ruben Bain and Ahmad Moten, among guys who have played meaningful snaps this season. Uh, and then you go to the freshman who just got here. Justin Scott, who I think they have big plans for. I would assume he would be in a starting defensive
Yeah,
tackle type position going into next year. Cole McConaughey was probably good enough to be a rotational edge rusher. Armando Blunt, young true freshman, has played 44 snaps, but I would assume he would be in the mix. And then you have Booker Pickett, Josh Fortin, Marquise Lightfoot, Artavius Jones, Elias Rudolph, Dylan Russell. If you do the math, you lose five experienced defensive linemen to graduation, including Marley Cook, guys that have played a lot in their careers. I would say Miami, at the very least, probably signs three defensive linemen.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you've got to get at least one tackle and maybe one edge or at least two tackles because that's again the spot where I'm most fearful moving forward. Even if you have Ahmad Moten continue to develop and play well along with Justin Scott, you still don't have enough there behind them. You need at least three to four defensive tackles that could play and rotate in and out. Play that Bama way, play that Georgia way. On the edge, I think you've got enough guys, and maybe along with the recruiting class, and maybe you can get away with what you have. Maybe add one more guy out of the portal, but I think defensive tackle should be the focus.
Yeah, I agree. And you're gonna have to go out and find those guys. They don't just grow on trees. It's hard. I mean, Simeon Barrow was turned out to be a great pickup for them, but you're not always gonna hit home runs with that. Just go ask
No.
Florida State. Um, Francisco Maui Noah at linebackers gone. Wesley Bissainthe has 1 year of eligibility left after this year. He hasn't been spectacular, hasn't been terrible. He's been okay. Jalen Alderman, I think, has 1 year left after this year. He's a redshirt junior, so he could technically return. And then you've got Popo Aguirre, Bobby Washington, Malik Bryant, who's more of a stand-up edge rusher, Chase Smith, Darius Hayes, and Cameron Pruitt. I know Miami staff feels good about some of the young linebackers they have, but I think it kind of sucks that they haven't played more. I kind of get a little worried, like, okay, Maui Noah's gone, Basainth, who knows what's going to happen with him? You never know what, if he decides to go pro and get crazy. I think linebacker is certainly a position where you're probably going to need to take another transfer or two.
Yeah, I think one of the reason why a lot of those young guys haven't played is because you've got Mano and Basant ahead of them, right? You
Hmm.
got Alderman in there, but I think in the small amount of snaps they've gotten, Popo Aguirre before the injury, I think looked like he can be a really good linebacker. Malik Bryant's looked good. I think
Hmm.
you've got some talent there at linebacker, like you said. I think, but adding one experienced guy, I think is worthwhile. Maybe finding that Manoa in the portal and having him play the way he played last year, not this year.
The secondary,
Which, by the way, have we checked that this isn't sort of a Mario Wario thing, and that this isn't Francis Manoa's Wario, because this is not the same dude that I saw last year. This is getting ridiculous.
Wario, I love it. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than I think coaches have sort of figured out his weaknesses and are exposing it. That's it. They watched him on tape, they studied him. So this is what these analysts do. They get paid a lot of money to do this, Carlos. This is what
Yeah,
they're supposed to do.
they do. I do this shit and I don't get paid for it.
No, you don't. You make absolutely zero, but
It costs me money because I've got to pay for the subscription to the damn website to get your articles. I have to pay for them. Mind you, we talk all the time. I don't get them for free. So there you go, folks. If you think I get shit for free or get paid for this, you are sadly mistaken. This actually it costs me money to be on this podcast. You've heard me go on this podcast and leave people waiting to do their taxes. So it actually costs me money.
it's appreciated though, man. I'll pay you in the orders from North South Grill or
And
wherever it
goodwill
is.
and wings.
There you go. Goodwill and wings and beer and friendship, I guess. And whenever you need to talk about the Canes and pop off, I'm here to listen. Um, so anyway, let's go to the secondary. You got three starters who have started every game for Miami. Mish Powell, Jaden Harris, Daryl Porter Jr. Porter Jr. and Powell will be gone. You've got Jaden Harris, who is finishing his third year. You've got OJ Frederick, who is started 6 games now, played 450 snaps. You'll get Jadis Richard back for 1 more year. You'll get Deani Hill, if you want him, back for one
Yeah.
more year.
I
Uh,
want Jaden Harris back.
yeah. So you'll have Hill, Richard, Frederick and Harris as your most experienced guys, and then you got all those freshmen you've recruited the last couple of years, plus Damari Brown.
Yeah.
Secondary needs an upgrade, does it not?
Listen, that secondary needs some Kardashian type work, right? They've got to get that Brazilian butt lift. They need to pull the cheeks back. They need to get the lip fillers. They need that Botox. That whole secondary needs Dr. 90210 right now.
Yeah, I'm guessing Markeith Williams will be gone. He hasn't played. He's played 71 snaps this year. Garbage time minutes. Those are the kind of guys who enter the portal. He's been here 3 years. Uh, Robbie Washington was moved from receiver to DB. He's played 19 snaps. The great Robert Stafford, we've heard so many things about. Robert
Yeah.
Stafford, what's he going to play? He's played 28 snaps. in 2 seasons.
I thought that guy was not even on the roster anymore.
Yeah, he may not be. I don't go out to practice and do attendance because nobody's allowed out there. But Brian Balaam was another one that was on the roster for a while. Like you said, Stafford is still on the roster. I just did a search. He's still here. So, but that's part of the deal. And look, Miami, I'm gonna say this. For everybody's like, oh, we've got all these freshmen coming in. Outside of OJ Frederic, Carlos, which I think when we did a mailbag early on, we both said he might be the only one who starts and plays. I think to this point, he is the only freshman who has started a game from this last
Yeah.
class that was number 7 in the
You said
country.
Frederic, and I said Zaquan Patterson.
Right. Zaquan has played, I'm looking at the grand total right here because I did this earlier today. He's played 106 snaps. Elijah Alston is actually second. He's played 100, not Elijah Alston, Elijah Lofton. It's too many Elijahs. He's played 120 snaps, so a little bit more than Zaquan. But I'm trying to tell you, and if you look at the transfers, right? Miami brought in 14 transfers. The guys who are full-time starters to this point are Mish Powell, Tyler Barron, Simeon Barrow, Zach Carpenter, Sam Brown, Damian Martinez, and Cam Ward. So 7 out of the 14. So if you do the math, there are more than 7 guys that are quality starters from Miami leaving after this year. If you hit on 7, that's not going to be enough to fill the holes.
No.
And the freshmen don't play. So somewhere between now and the season opener next year against Notre Dame on August 31st, uh, you need to hit on player development and you need to hit on the transfer portal, or you will not be, you'll be a 3 or 4 loss team, right? Which is what we think they are without Cameron.
Yeah, and listen, we talked about this when Mario got hired, right? And even year one, I said that success, they may ultimately reach their level of success where they want to be an elite program again under Mario Cristobal, but success wasn't going to be linear. It wasn't going to be a straight shot upward. There was going to be sort of an up and a down. You might have in that year three a peak and then a valley immediately after, and I think that's what we're staring at right now. You've gotten the benefit of Cam Ward. You've got that peak. You're almost there. You can finish with a 10-win season, 11-win season, win that ACC title and run in the playoffs and see what happens. But next year, I think the expectations are get ready because there's going to be a dip. I mean, even if you hit, let's say you go out and get 12 guys in the portal, not all 12 guys are going to be monsters, starters, Cam Ward type players. If you get 8 of those guys, you're still about a 3-loss team, right?
Yeah.
Depending on where those positions you slide them in those positions, and depending on how those guys on the roster develop who haven't played much, and who those freshmen are they come in, who knows where you end up, but I think you're probably looking at a 3-loss team unless you get some sort of another Cam Ward sort of revelation at quarterback or at another position that could really just take over games like a running back. Whatever reason they find a running back in the portal that is, kind of like Boise State's, and he just sort of takes games over.
Or somehow you convince Jeremiah Smith to come home. And now you've got the best
Yeah,
wide
yeah,
receiver
and
in
just throw the
football.
ball to him 97 times a game.
Yeah,
You do
it'll
the
be
old Tecmo Bowl thing where you just run backwards and run
yes.
around the end zone and throw it, which is kind of what Cam Ward's doing now.
Yeah, it's I like doing this exercise now in the middle of the season, right? Because people's heads are just, oh, are they going to make the playoffs? There's so much more to talk about. Program building, I think, is so much more fun to discuss, looking a big picture view at your program and what's happened through 10 games, right? To this point, where is this program headed? What can we expect for next year? Because Florida State, they got drunk last year on 13 and 0, and look at where they're at now.
Yeah,
Can
look
that
at you now.
happen to
Look at you
Miami?
now, man. You look how you're feeling.
Can you? Yeah, look at how I'm feeling. But can you imagine if somehow Miami next season were to go through what Florida State is going through right now? What would happen, Carlos?
Listen, there's no way in hell Mario Cristobal would be if they were 1-9 right now. Mario would have to move to Boca Raton and commute into Coral Gables to be able to coach the team because they will find his house and they will burn him in effigy. They will take all his mangoes. Raul will be there first in line taking his mangoes, poisoning his bushes. If you think it was bad what they did to that tree in Alabama, in what was it called? What's it called? Something Corners, Tombs Corners, whatever the hell it's called. Poisoning the tree of a rival, they will just poison all of Mario's bushes. They'll pee in his pool. There'll be all kinds of ugly stuff going on.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it would be really bad. But look, you have to.
They'll put Vicks vapor rub in his coffee and in his cafecito. No, it'll be bad.
I don't think Miami would have a I believe in Mario's recruiting more so than I did Manny Diaz. And I think you're going to see guys like Justin Scott develop. I think you're going to see guys like Jojo Trader develop. You're going to see guys like Mark Fletcher take the next step. You're going to see Francis Mauigoa go from, freshman All-American to probably first round worthy offensive tackle. You'll see Markel Bell take a leap up, right? Guys are going to improve. I just think that to maintain hey, we're going to be in the conference championship race every single year, that's hard. It's hard to get to that level. So you're right. It may not be linear. They may be a 3 or 4 loss team next year, even with a top 50 quarterback.
Yeah.
But I do believe in Mario's recruiting, and I do think he has signed some good players. It's just he's going to have to hit on some of those guys. Some of those guys are going to have to take a step next year for this program to continue to be competitive and in the hunt to win ACC championships.
Yeah,
So,
and the other thing we can't predict is you've had over the last couple of seasons, and you've seen it, guys decline, right? That played
right.
really well. Like we saw Cam Kitchens go from being an All-American to being okay last year. He was good,
Just like
but he wasn't.
Maui just
Yeah,
like
and
Maui
that's what I was going to
linebacker.
say. Marino was the other guy. He had a really good season last year, took a dip this year. So we don't know. And the other thing you can't predict is injuries. Like you saw Jalen Rivers be out for a while. We got Simeon Barrow out now. The injury to Zion Nelson, I think, also shuffled that offensive line, made things a little bit difficult early on during Mario's tenure. So we don't know those things, and those are also scary. And if you don't have the depth in the roster to be able to sustain those sorts of injuries and declines to substitute guys in and out, if the next man's not ready to go to step in, then you've got problems.
Yeah. All right, Carlos. Let's move on to the mailbag because
The
people,
important stuff.
the important stuff. There was a fun discussion. I enjoyed that. I enjoy our off-season discussions sometimes more than our in-season discussions because people just want to get hung up on results all the time,
Because they sound mostly like what we talk about off air.
which is,
Generally, all the shit we were just talking about now, not the regular stuff
yeah, yeah, for sure.
that people want to hear about.
Tyler Overly sends this question into us. Unless we have a few more flips, it doesn't look like our recruiting class finishes top five. Is a top 10 class considered a win this year? It feels like we should be pushing for top five given the year we're having. Mario needs to Mario. All right, Tyler. I get recruiting rankings are important to people. I know they're certainly important to the head coach. He cares about that. Um, Miami did flip a player out of California, 6'4", 242-pound edge rusher, Hayden Lowe from Oaks Christian in Westlake Village, California. They flipped him from USC. So a California kid decided I'd rather go play on the other side of the country in Miami than rather to go play for a 4-5 USC team. So good victory for Miami. And there could be more flips, by the way. Okay. But Miami's class right now is ranked 20, actually ranked 10th. They've got 23 commitments. I think there's a chance they could move into the top 10 again. I would say this, don't get hung up on the actual ranking, team number ranking. Get hung up on what Mario does with the last two classes because that is ultimately what's going to tell you whether or not this is going to be a success. Do the 2023 and 2024 recruiting classes produce 20 starters next season? Do they produce 15 starters next season? Do those guys become all ACC? Do five of them become all ACC? That's how you judge recruiting classes. Don't judge them by the rankings. People miss. There's transfers all the time. All kinds of things affect your roster now. Whereas before, you could just look at a team ranking and say, "Oh, in 4 years, this program has signed three top five classes in a row. That means next year they're going to be in the national." No, that's not the way it works anymore. The transfer portal always changes things. So I would say don't get hung up on that. Get hung up on do the players in the last two recruiting classes honestly take a step up? And if me and Carlos are not talking about those 23 and 24 recruits when we do our podcast during spring football in April, and we're not talking about that in March, then whatever Mario's doing on the recruiting trail is meaningless. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we will be talking about guys in 23 and 24.
Yeah, not only that, but I think also, Mario's been really good closing classes the
Hmm.
last couple seasons. So I think he's going to close it well. He always does. And I think obviously the more success they have on the field, the easier it'll be for him to close well. Even if they aren't top five, I think they've accumulated enough talent and continue to do so that if they develop them properly, they should be in a position to have guys elevate and step up, but that remains to be seen. And I think, when it comes to recruiting, I think Dion gave a great answer the other day when he was asked about it, about using the balance of the portal and recruiting classes. Sometimes it's you'd rather take a guy that's experienced that you can plug in and play right now as opposed to a kid who's a developmental freshman, right? You go out and you find the best freshman you could possibly find. If you hit on 12 of those guys, 13 of those guys, and they're really good guys, 4 or 5 of them play early on, the rest are ready to play the next season. And then you supplement that with the portal. That's his vision because he feels like wasting scholarships on guys that are going to take 3 years to develop just isn't fast enough for that program. So I think there's a balance to it. You don't go the Mike Norvell way, and you don't go just the Dabo Sweeney way. I think the balance of the two is a way to go.
All right. This question is from Victor Manuel, B1AZES Blazes on Twitter. Will Cam Ward break Case Keenum's record for the most passing touchdowns in NCAA history? Well, um, assuming that they're counting what he did at Incarnate Word, Cam Ward has 151 career touchdown passes to this point. Case Keenum's record, I believe, is 155. So if you were to ask me, will Cam Ward finish with more than 155 with two regular season games left and potentially an ACC championship game and the
Yep.
playoff? I think odds are pretty good. Yes, he will break the record. He could very well do that against Wake Forest, who's not great defensively. So,
Yep. I agree.
all right. Columbus Kane asks, do we win the next three games and get in the playoff? Um, that's a great question, Columbus Kane. I would say I'm about 60% positive, 70% at most that Miami will win its final two regular season games and then beat SMU in the ACC championship. I feel somewhat confident, but I also have more doubt now because I feel like between the injuries on defense and some of the shortcomings on that side of the ball and teams figuring out Miami's offense a little bit more, that I would not be shocked if they lost one of the last two games to Wake Forest or Syracuse and missed the ACC championship. At which point they'd be out of the playoff, and then maybe Cam Ward doesn't get the record because he doesn't play in the
Yeah.
bowl game, you know? So I don't know. How do you feel about it, Carlos?
Yeah. I think if there's a guy that could come up with a plan to sort of muddy the game and make it closer than it should be and maybe try and pull off an upset, I think it's Dave Clawson because he's really good at doing that kind of stuff. He's a really good coach for Wake Forest. I think their system sort of lends itself to that. But I don't think they're going to beat Miami. I think their defense is way too bad. I think Cam Ward's just going to throw it all over them, and they're just going to get back into the rhythm offensively against them. Syracuse, to me, I think they've taken a step back late in the season. I don't think they're as good as they were earlier on. It's on the road, but again, what's the Carrier Dome advantage to me isn't really big. It's loud, it's echoey.
Syracuse lost at home to Stanford earlier this year.
Right. So to me, it's not like they're a world beater. My main concern is really the ACC championship game if it's SMU. And here's why. SMU is averaging about 200 yards rushing a game. They have a quarterback that they involve in the running game, so you've got to play them 11 on 11. We just saw what Georgia Tech did to Miami by controlling the line of scrimmage and running the ball effectively and using a running quarterback. Not only that, but the running back that they have is pretty damn explosive. We know him very well, in Brashard Smith. They also are able to throw the ball a little bit, not as well as as other teams that they've had on the schedule, but better than Georgia Tech. And their defense is solid. So to me, that SMU matchup is a bit scary.
Don't disagree with you. Franco Anton, Skip Sucksmaker on Twitter says,
All right.
what happened to Ruben Bain? Is he playing this year? Well, I think he's playing, but he's playing hurt. I think he is playing not at 100%. And if you look at his last three games, have not been great. I think he's got five missed tackles between those three games. He's produced just five pressures and one sack. And I think while uh, we had big expectations for him as a sophomore, I think getting hurt in the Florida game really hampered him. And you're seeing what it's like to not play a season 100%.
Yep. I also think you're seeing a guy that's been game planned for. I think when he came in as a freshman, nobody knew what to expect from that guy, and he was sort of a revelation during the season. And now coming into this season, everybody knew you've got to block Ruben Bain. That's got to be where your offensive line starts. And I think also because he's not getting support from everybody else on that defensive line creating pressures, that doesn't alleviate the double teams. They're able to double
Mhm.
team Bain and game plan for Bain and still single block the other guys now because they're not doing their job. So all that factors in along with him playing hurt.
CGS Junior 2000, Canes 2000 on Twitter asks, is there any way Lance can make improvements on the defensive side of the ball, or are we who we are at this point in the season and have to hope the offense scores 50 plus points per game?
I talked about it last week. I think he's got to go with more of that three down front, especially now with Barrow hurt. You've got to use your quickness on that defensive line, which they did a good job of last year against Clemson when they started using that three down front. And I think you've got to play more cover two, cover four, cover three in the back end, play more zone. Come up and make plays on the ball as opposed to having to turn and run with the receivers, and also get the secondary in their right run fits, and not give up big plays because guys are out of position. The ultimate key here moving forward is if this defense can be competent, they can win games. If they're not going to be in the right position, they're too deficient talent-wise and skill-wise to not be in the right spot. They've got to be fundamentally sound because if they don't make tackles, if they're not in the right spot, and they just try to win things athletically, it's going to be a long day.
Yeah, I agree. I would also do something else. I would move Mish Powell into the slot corner position at this point. You don't have Jadis
Yeah,
Richard anymore. I think you got to play Zaquan Patterson, even if he makes mistakes. Uh, you have to put him out there, and you got to hope that he
yeah.
that he does a good job coming downfield and stopping the run because he's a hitter. He's a physical guy. So I think you gotta play that way. You
You mean
just gotta,
exactly what we said last week they should have done.
yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
I got you.
Andrew V 17, why has the defense regressed so much since last season? The D line isn't doing much, and Gidry keeps putting Kiko and Harris out there every week, even though they're liabilities. Yeah, I mean, we kind of just went over it, Andrew. I think part of it is, faith in the freshmen. Maybe they just don't have a lot of it. That's why you keep seeing the same guys. Again, player development is important, right? You can bring great players in here, but you got to have them ready to contribute at one point or another. And I told you guys early in the year, I really hope Miami's coaching staff does a good job preparing Zaquan Patterson to play late in the year. If you're going to make a run in the playoffs, if you're going to have a
Yep.
chance to win an ACC championship, it can't just be OJ Frederic is the only freshman who contributes, right? You didn't spend any money really in the secondary this offseason, so you were counting on freshmen, right? Those freshmen to come in and play. Well, you got to start playing them at some point.
Yeah, and again, we talked about it. If they're not going to get pressure up front, that secondary is going to be exposed. We said that coming into the season. And, credit to you, you also said that Mish Paul was not going to be on the level they needed on that back end to lead that secondary. You were hoping that he was a smart enough guy, but athletically, he didn't seem like it. And they've missed Cam Kitchens a ton back there.
Yep. Josh Sarnoff, 80. I find it troubling that Miami's alignment issues have coincided with the start of its helmet communication. Can we ask Gidry about what his philosophy is regarding those comms? And is it possible to it's actually hurting more than helping this year? First of all, the comms get shut off, I think, at the 15-second mark, if I'm not mistaken, Josh. So, most of these guys, remember, they're waiting to see which personnel come in for offense, right? When you're on the defensive side of the football, the coach is looking, well, who are they bringing on the field? Who are they taking out? How do I adjust? And then a lot of the communication is through hand signals. So I don't think the helmet comms really do anything. They have always sort of prepared to continue hand communication and sign communication as things have been working before. My biggest issue is they're doing a poor job when teams run motion. They're not adjusting well. They're not somebody runs motion and it's like all of a sudden they fall apart. It's like a house of cards. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, I think what Georgia Tech did a really good job of was they would line up in a set. Miami would come out and match that set, then they'd move shift or motion out of it, and then they'd be running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And I think Georgia Tech also used some formations and sets out of necessity because they had to run the quarterback a lot more than they anticipated because of the injury to Haynes King. But being in man to man creates that confusion because you now have to chase the alignment around as opposed to just shifting the structure of the defense to match the formation and match the motion when you're in zone. Now you have to chase across the field, and you're not going to bump over to the next guy. Hey, you take him, you take him. Or if you do, now there's confusion as to who's got who. So to me, that's another reason why you play zone is to keep the integrity of the structure of the defense, to keep your eyes forward as opposed to be chasing a man. You're still identifying what's going on with eyes forward towards the ball as opposed to chasing a man around.
If you had an elite safety, a real alpha male who could be trusted back there, a lot of these issues wouldn't be happening, in my opinion.
And I think you're also getting like I talked about earlier with the stunts. I think that adds to it because you're calling in some complex stuff. with stunts and other fires, blitzes and things like that, where you're having to call all this stuff in. It takes a little bit of time. They have to adjust to see what the alignments are, and then the movement throws that whole shit off. They're still trying to process the call, and then they can't figure out their alignment.
Yeah.
But you're right. If they had Cam Kitchens, it'd be a lot different.
Troy Ortiz, Kenneth, with a bunch of numbers, says, "Is the issue with our D the talent or the coaching? How can we struggle against every single mediocre ACC team?" Um, I just think you're in that weird window of a bunch of seniors and older players on the defensive line and a bunch of younger guys who just aren't ready to play yet. You don't have a lot of middlemen, right? Like your middlemen are Ruben Payne and Anthony Moten, and Bain was hurt, so you don't really have a second layer beyond the seniors on the defensive front. I would say you're almost in, and the same thing in the secondary. You're in a transition year. You brought in Mish Powell to be your lead safety because you had 6 or 7 freshmen that you brought in that just aren't ready yet beyond OJ Frederic. And then you lose Damari Brown, who was sort of that second year guy who you expected big things from. So I think you're just caught in one of those weird years where you don't have much in the middle in terms of sophomore, junior player development. And that's
So,
what
so what you're
happens.
saying, what you're saying is this defense is not like a parfait. It does not have layers.
It does not have layers. It has crusts. It has an upper crust and a lower crust and not a lot of stuff in the middle. I think that's really when you look at it, it's Mario is rebuilding the roster and he's still not there yet. Stop Cop City, Taco Thunder 5 says, "Is the team minus Cam Ward really that improved from last season? And what role do the coordinators have in limiting the team's upside?" Yeah, I still think they're improved than last season. I think the running back situation is better. I think the tight end situation turned out to be better. I think the talent overall is better. I just think sometimes you can be better and still be a 3 or 4 loss team without a special quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I
All
think
right.
yeah, rather than being 7-5, I think they this year, like we talked about, coming in 9-3, 8-4, without Cam Ward, probably 8-4.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. And sometimes it's a turnover or something that changes that, right? It's a call, right? It's getting the call overturned against Virginia Tech that separates you from being 9-3, 8-4 most years.
Yep,
Um, All right, this is from Quan, Dapper Quan. Is Gidry back next year? I mean, unless LSU calls, the LSU might be wanting to get rid of Blake Baker with how bad that defense is. Look, I wouldn't shit on Gidry and just think he's a terrible coordinator because they haven't been as good as you wanted them to be. We just went over all the reasons why. It's his
absolutely.
second year. He hasn't been recruiting here for 4 years. This is his second year.
I mean, look, he did a really good job last year, but there were times where, that North Carolina game, that Louisville game, where he seemed overmatched, where the other guy on the other side of the ball had his number and was just
Right.
dialing shit up that he had no answer for. Um, so going into this season, the thought was that maybe it was, they just caught him a couple times, right? That happens as a coach. But really what it's looking like is that he needs a certain level of talent to be able to execute his defense, and he doesn't have it right now. And when he doesn't have that level of
That's most
talent,
coaches, by the way.
right, right. And then but then his flaws of being out schemed on a lot of occasions now start to turn up a little bit more. Those warts show up a little bit more. I mean, look at the difference between their. I know it's the non-conference was dog shit, but their non-conference they were giving up 10.2 points per game, 10.3 points per game. They're giving up 31.7 points per game in conference play. That is awful. That is
Hmm.
not good. Their point differential went from 42 to 8.5 in conference play. This is not just a talent thing. I think schematically, I think he's been a little bit stubborn and sticking to his system, and he's needed to adjust and hasn't done a good job of that. I think he was more flexible with it last year, maybe out of necessity because of injuries, but this year he's been a little bit more resistant to that, and he needs to make that shift.
Yep. Javier B. J Boy 1724. Why aren't we giving some of the younger guys an opportunity, particularly on defense? At least give them a chance. It can't be any worse. I remember the 2001 Canes, 2000 two Canes would do that. Well, Javi, I don't know if you remember the 2001 to 2000 Canes, but you had guys like Sean Taylor, who was a freshman. It's a little bit different when you've got an alien back there to bring in off the bench.
Yep,
Uh, and I would say this. Um, it was a different game back then. College football has evolved. So how many teams are running spread and hurry up and all kinds of stuff that we didn't necessarily see back then. It's a different game.
And you say it can't be worse? Trust me, it could.
My editor, Mitch Light from The Athletic, says, "What happens if all 17 ACC teams finish with two losses?" Yeah, that's not possible, but it is possible, Carlos, that four teams finish with two losses: SMU, Miami, and then Clemson, Pitt, or Louisville. Pitt and Louisville both can't finish 6-2 because they face each other a week from now. But in the event we have a cluster F, as people like to call it, I don't know if Miami will be in or out, and I don't know all the tiebreakers yet because I haven't gone that far down the rabbit hole. But let's just say if Miami wins its last two games, it is 1,000% going to the ACC championship game. They have the most important tiebreaker with Clemson belongs to them if they win their last two games. So we'll leave it at that. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll go down the rabbit hole otherwise.
Listen,
Um,
if they, oh my God, if they end up taking they shit the bed in one of these last two games, it's going to be wild, right? It's just it better not be one of these Johnny Depp shit in the bed things, right?
yeah, yeah, better not. 818 Cali Kane says, why/how is OJ Frederic outperforming our entire DB room that are older and more experienced? What is he doing that our other DBs are not understanding? He's a true freshman and isn't making the same mistakes that our veterans are. Why? Thanks again. Why? Well, I told you guys in the preseason, he came in and he looks like a grown man, right? He plays like a grown man. He understands coverage. He understands responsibilities. The coaching staff was very excited about him the moment he came in. And I think what it tells you is Miami's recruiting of the defensive back position before last season was not good. I just went over all the PFF numbers, right? Did I not, of snaps for guys like Markeith Williams and guys that have been here 2 and 3 years already? Um, didn't recruit well enough. Dropped the ball in defensive back recruiting. That's why he's outperforming guys.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is underrated when it comes to recruiting is football IQ. There are guys who understand the game,
Right.
not just understand their position, but understand the overall scheme of how they fit, their position fits within the scheme or the structure of the defense or offense, and understand situational football. And some guys have it, some guys don't. You'll see guys with a lot of talent that don't have that situational awareness or football IQ, and they just can't get on the field. And when they do get on the field, they're a disaster because they're not able to grasp it, and they just rely on physical talent. And when a guy has both physical talent and high football IQ, those are the best performers.
Mondo Izagiri, AY2 Mondo. How upset should fans be? How hopeful should we be for the rest of the year? Um, Here's what I would tell you, Armando. We said in the preseason that Miami with Cam Ward needs to go to the ACC championship game. We said as long as they get there and as long as they show improvement, that's a step forward in year three.
Yep.
If they don't get to the ACC championship game and finish 10-2, Carlos, how
Then we're
would you
peeing in
feel?
Mario's pool. We're stealing his mangoes. We're burning his bushes. We're doing it all.
Yes, I would assume we were going to graduate to that level if they finish 10-2 and don't get to the ACC championship game. Because there is no scenario where they finish 11-1 and don't get to the ACC championship game. I just told you that. So they finish 11-1, they get to the ACC championship game, but don't win. Are you still riding?
I'm not writing. Uh, I'm gritting my teeth, and I'm not very happy about it. But I'm accepting, like a rational human being. It'll take a couple weeks after the season because I don't get really rational until I'm really separated from football. So yeah, as a rational human being, I would say this is progress for the program. Unless they go to the bowl game and they get throttled by somebody they shouldn't be throttled by. They should actually beat.
They're 2 wins better already than they were last year. So I think if they get to double-digit wins and they show progress and this Cam Ward season leads to the next Cam Ward coming in
Yeah,
and
that's
more
what you want.
recruits and then you accomplish what you want to accomplish. But there's so many other variables. It's I'll put it to you this way, Armando Izagirre. It's more than the record.
Yeah.
It's more than the on-field results. Does Miami become a perennial contender again, or was this a Cam Ward flash in the pan? That's
Even if
going to
it
be
is,
the most
even
important
if we
question.
just look at the record, even if we just look at the record, they should beat Wake Forest and get to 10 wins for only the second time in the last 22 years. That's progress.
Yeah, correct. And I think most people would take that, Carlos. I think if somebody were to say to you before the season, before Cam Ward went nuts, because people were hopeful for Cam Ward, but nobody really knew,
Yeah, nobody
right?
expected this.
If somebody were to say to you, Miami goes 10-2 and just misses the ACC title game because they lost their last game at Syracuse by a touchdown or a field goal or some turnover. Somebody were to say that to you and say, "Man, 10-2, Cam Ward had a great year. The offense, they got another great recruiting class."
You know, you're disappointed, but you're happy with what's on the horizon, and you'll take it. I'd rather that than 7-5 and losing a game because we didn't take a knee.
That is correct. Brother, I appreciate you. Can people buy more t-shirts there at the Ledo house?
Listen, they can buy anything they want. I'll sell you my decorations in the house if you want. Whatever you got. Listen, I've got some other stuff. Look, water bottles. You guys want some water bottles? I'll sell you some water bottles. I'm like a guy outside. It's Christmas time, dude. I got to start racking up the money to be able to pay for Christmas gifts for the family. I've got this basketball camp that Manny has roped me into putting my daughter in, which costs money. Damn him. So yeah, Manny continues to cost me money is the message of this episode. So yeah, please, look up my wife on Instagram. She does a lot of custom stuff. She's the one that actually put the designs together for the MIA All Day t-shirts. It's Love and Light all together. Couture, Couture on Instagram. Um, just search it.
She
It'll pop
couldn't
up.
come out with a longer name. It couldn't just be
Yeah.
Ledo's setting stuff, something like that. Something
No,
really
because then
short.
that would connotate that it was me that was involved, and I take zero credit for it.
Okay.
That I have zero creative bones in my body. You can look up LL Couture, LLCOUTURE on Instagram, and it'll pop up. Plenty of good
There
stuff there.
there you go. There you go. That's where you go to help Carlos out. Thank you for joining me once again, brother. And what are you gonna do Saturday? We don't have a game to watch.
I don't know. I don't know. I was hoping the wind wouldn't be blowing so I could go fishing, but that's not going to happen. So at this point, I'm just going to sit down on my couch and watch every single college football game available.
Sounds good to me. That's what I'll be
Sounds like
doing.
your Saturday. Well,
Sounds like
first of all,
mine.
I've got to go to basketball from
That's right.
10:15 to 11:30,
You and I
and
will
then I
be
can do
there.
whatever I want. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. All right, man. Thanks for coming on. Thank you for tuning in to Wide Right. Make sure you listen to Carlos Ledo's podcast, the MIA All Day Pod. Subscribe to The Athletic. Help me out. Subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or wherever you download your podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Wide Right. We'll be back next week as Miami prepares to face Wake Forest.
peace.